How's everybody's day?
Hey.
Hi.
Oleski, Oleski.
Everybody sleep well last night? Who wants to take under over on whether we reset the chain or not?
No, maybe just some slashing. But it's not clear to me. I just woke up, a few hours ago. It's not clear to me if did we finalize an unavailed block or just justify it.
No, it's not.
No.
No, what? No, non-finalized or not justified?
Not even justified thus far. I don't think because, well, I'm not going to speak out of turn. I don't think it's even justified though.
Okay. Hey, Jamie.
Hello,
Hi.
guys. I'm just going to quickly ping the PeerDAS testing group as well. People might be busy with Holoski.
Yeah.
Actually, I just saw Francesco's question about are we having the call. Should we just do a quick one and see if everyone wants to get back to Holoski?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of updates either.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Maybe we can start. And
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yamano, do you want to start first? Maybe we can start first.
sorry.
Do you want to start first?
Yeah. Should this call be recorded or not? I'm not sure if it is recorded normally.
It is already recording.
Okay, sure. Yes, so during this week, I mainly work on validator custody. So I have a working implementation. However, it is without the backfill. I don't backfill data columns when I increase the validator count. It works pretty well. However, an interesting point, I have a new bug. Actually, I think it is a bug which was already here before, but we didn't notice. It's with Lighthouse. I noticed that sometimes Lighthouse sends some columns to Prism, and Prism did not receive it. And when I look in the logs of Prism, I see that Lighthouse just send some prune message, gossip prune message for some data column subnets, and so in this case, Prism did not receive any data column. Why I think this issue was here before and not visible? It's just because without validator custody, you custody either 8 data columns or either 128. If you custody only 8, the likelihood to have this issue is quite low. So the issue may be here, but maybe you never see it. And if you are a super node, you can miss up to 64 out of 128 data columns. And thanks to reconstruction, if you miss up to 64 data columns, it's still okay because you will reconstruct, or somebody will reconstruct for you. No, you will reconstruct if you are a super node, and so the block will be available. And I see the issue when, in the worst case, which is actually when I custody exactly 64 columns, because in this case I am subscribed to 64 subnets. And if at least 1 out of 64 columns is missing, then the block is missing, and I cannot reconstruct. So yeah, I have this bug now. I investigated it with Jamie. But I think, yes, it's not directly related to validator custody, but validator custody just exposed it. And yeah, that's it. And next step is to work on backfill. Yes, that's all for me.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Manu. Yeah, so so we will look into why Lighthouse is sending those Prum messages to Prism. I haven't got a chance to look into it, but that seems like an interesting bug.
Yeah.
Good find. Yeah. And other than that, we don't have a whole lot of updates from Lighthouse. We've got the flag to delay publishing block and data columns, so we can so I can share that in the testing chat later. And then we've done a bunch of small sync fixes, but we still have a lot of issues with syncing. So sometime this week, we're going to try to do more testing on DevNet 5. And on that, Lion has started working on validator custody implementation. I think initially we're going to also do no backfill at the beginning. I think the main difference is probably just the timing of when we do the CGC update. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it works on Prism, because if you guys just immediately update CGC, and if there's no downside of getting disconnected by peers, then maybe it's not a bad idea to have CGC updated early. So yeah, we're gonna continue working on validator custody, and I'll share the flag for testing after this call. That's all from Lighthouse.
Just yes, for now. So we update the CGC when we are sure that we are correctly subscribed to subnets and we have enough peers. But the idea, yes, the idea is to update it only when we finish the backfill.
Yeah, makes sense. So are you planning to eventually implement backfill immediately?
Yeah. But this week I'm starting to work on it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think for the moment we're probably just going to try it with the most basic implementation and see how things go. Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks. Then I'll pass it on to Lowstar. Matt, do you have any updates?
Hello. Yeah, still working on a pretty substantial refactor to update how the DA flows through uh, through the code, and it's going to make it easier in order to clean up our syncing, just make that more efficient, and also make it a lot easier in order to actually implement the validator custody. So we haven't got to that. I still probably have another week with testing and getting it all cleaned up, but it's going to make us much faster to implement the next pieces. So, but we are syncing. Everything is working now on DevNet. Got ourselves sorted out, and yeah, so everything's gravy there.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Teku, you got any updates?
Not much on Teku side. We have finished working on data column reconstruction and started work on validator custody, but not much progress at this time. That's all.
Cool, thanks. Do I have the Nimbus here? Yeah, Agnish.
Yeah. So we started work on validator custody, but right now we are actually going a bit off track. Like I think I would take another 2.5-ish weeks to refactor our column syncing. I talked about an alternative peer pool approach a couple of weeks ago, and what I effectively want to achieve is to give the users an option whether they want to sync greedily from supernodes or they want to totally avoid supernodes for syncing. And how we would do that is pretty simple. If let's say I custody 8 columns and I'm wanting to sync those all the time, I just don't want to waste any pure query. So I almost range request whatever CGC the peer is like. I basically range request whatever remote custody every peer has until I get to the common goal of getting reconstructability like activated or whatever, and then I reconstruct while syncing, and I persist only what I locally custody. In that way, until a given threshold, none of my pure, let's say, range requests are kind of wasted. And I still don't need supernodes to that great of an extent. This is kind of an approach that I'm thinking. And if the user doesn't want this, this should take more time than supernode syncing. But if the user doesn't want this, then we greedily preferentially range request supernodes or uh, nodes with higher validator custody. So this is something that I'm working on. I have also started work on validator custody, but I think if we have this sync approach, then backfilling for us becomes relatively simpler, even with validator custody, yes.
Yeah, my question is, why do you want to avoid to greedily sync on Supernode? I mean, I agree with the fact that the client should be able to sync without Supernode, but if some Supernodes are available, I don't see why it is a bad thing to
So
really...
it's more like a value thing that we have here. I don't know, like people from my team don't really like the idea of supernodes. I don't know why, but like I think it's good to give the users one option. The other thing is every peer is useful for blocks. So what we do is whenever we query a peer, we try to make the most out of, like, if we see that somebody is existing in our peer pool, we try to make the most use case out of that peer. Like we try to get the blocks by range and like, yeah. So let's say if we still get something they remotely custody just to fill in the reconstructability requirement, we are making the most use of that peer. Otherwise, let's say if the custody doesn't match, yeah, we are skipping that from the peer pool, but I think it's just more efficient to use the peer like that, every peer like that in the peer pool while syncing. So that is still an extent, right? I think I would be wasting more bandwidth if I try to find the intersection, or let's say in a realistic scenario, if there are like, as we discussed, even if there are 20% supernodes, what we effectively, so like while we sync, we have sort of a quota of the number of peers we um query, like that's around 5, like 3 to 5, and for our case, that probability of whether we hit a supernode is pretty scanty. So I think it's more feasible for us to get whatever they can serve and then reconstruct rather than otherwise. I think if we query like that, I think we would waste more bandwidth on the other case as well. So yeah, I mean, till an extent, yes, you're right that we might be wasting bandwidth till a point, but I think it's more like it's more dependent on what we are custodying and what we get. Like from a probability point of view, I don't think so. I don't think we I don't think we would be wasting more bandwidth than uh, having failed queries, if that makes sense.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Thanks, Akash. Yeah. Maybe I think we can probably discuss more of this approach of async as well. Like to understand
Yes.
a bit more.
But in
yeah.
overall, the idea is like, since we have one peer pool, like if you have one peer pool, if you don't have two separate peer pools, one for columns and one for just blocks, I think it's best to make most use out of a peer. And reconstructability, we have parallel reconstruction as well for, I think, most of us. I think, yeah, I mean, till an extent, till 50%, if you just take whatever the remote custodies have to give, I think it's reasonable. And you are not having to depend on supernodes. And I think that's a very big like value alignment addition kind of a thing, that you can actually publicly say that you don't need supernodes to sync. Or like, yeah, sort of like that. The other advantages, I think this would come in very handy in case of validator custody, because let's say validator custody changes and like let's say validator custody changes and your local custody columns totally differ, and now your column database is kind of corrupt. Then having this sync approach would help you backfill faster, I think.
But in my opinion, you don't care about supernode or not. You just know when you think what's the set of column you need to fetch, and you know you have a set of peers. These peers custody some columns, and you fetch the columns from the peers which custody them. If they are supernodes, it's okay. If they are not supernode, it's okay as well. I mean, and if the validator custody, I mean, if the nodes only custody 64 out of 128, it's okay. I mean, at least in Prism, in the code, there is when we fetch columns, we don't rely on the fact that the peer is a supernode or not. We just compute the column thanks to the CGC and the PRD. We just compute what columns the peer should custody, and we use it. And okay, we try to minimize the number of peer we query. So indirectly, it's fetched from supernodes, not for supernode, but it's fetched for peers with higher count of columns we
Yes.
need first. But if there is no
Yes.
supernode at all, it won't change our logic. The logic will be exactly the same.
I do understand, but in this case, you're relying more on the network. We are trying to sync as much good as we can without relying a lot on the network. Like as less as we can rely on the network, because we don't know what is the real-time distribution of supernodes, let's say in a given mainnet situation. So I think we would go for this approach for us. We would range request whatever they remote custody.
Yeah.
So they can provide all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we should probably move on. Yeah, I think we can continue this discussion offline as well. looks like we don't have Grandine, so I think we can probably just go straight to DevNet.
Yeah, sure. I can give an
Rafael?
update on that. Yeah, so 4 days ago or 5 days ago, we launched DevNet 5, which is basically a relaunch of DevNet 4, now with a fixed Geth version from the start on. And that has been pretty stable. There's only right now, Grandina that it's failing. They already like pushed the supposed fix, but it seems to have some issues. At least it's going like out of memory right now. So yeah, I will talk with them and let them debug this problem. Yeah, besides the DevNet 5 launch, I think there was nothing else.
Cool. Thanks, Rafael. Okay, then I guess we can move on to spec discussion. I think Dimitri did raise a point about wanting to discuss removing or altering sampling concept from the Fulu spec. Dimitri, do you want to give a quick lowdown?
Yeah, I suggest that to remove sampling page from the spec, and to check data availability, we just check that custody for requested block root is filled, and it's enough to continue import in fork choice. And we could just make spec simpler this way. And also, I suggest to make custody requirements the same that requirement for one validator node. So the requirements will be equal.
Manu?
Yeah, just a semantic thing. You are talking about dropping sampling concept. I think it's important to really say dropping peer sampling, because we are currently doing sampling, we are doing subnet sampling. And it's kind of misleading when people talk about sampling for peer sampling. I kind of agree with you if you replace drop sampling by drop peer sampling concept. But we cannot drop sampling at all. I don't know if I'm clear or not.
Yeah, I think. Sorry. So Dimitri, go on. You want to go first?
I'm not sure how it will make. Will it make spec simple?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
So you suggest to drop subnets? I confused.
No.
Could you repeat, please?
Yeah, I think in your GitHub comments, you are writing drop sampling concept.
Mm-hmm.
Just drop sampling concept. I think you want to say drop peer sampling concept. I just passed into the chat the page about peer sampling, and let me know if I'm wrong. You want to drop this page.
Yeah.
So
Drop peer sampling, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really important to say peer sampling and just sampling, because currently we are doing sampling, we are doing subnet sampling. It's just to avoid confusion, because there is a lot of confusion about sampling, about subnet sampling and peer sampling. And
Yeah,
so if you want to drop peer sampling from the F fork, so I agree. Yeah.
I see currently in spec we already have something named custody sampling, and it looks enough for me.
Yeah. So Francesco said. 。 Okay, so maybe I mix custody sampling and subnet sampling. For me, it was the same.
Yeah, I think I think there's a bit of mixed terminology there. So I think what Manu was saying, that we want to drop sampling via making RPC request to peers, and just do sampling via subnet and getting it via gossip.
No, it's not totally true to say that, because if we keep the subnet sampling, and if for one reason or another the data column is not available via gossip, it's still possible to request it via RPC. I mean,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
yeah, that's why I think we should talk about peer sampling, subnet sampling, and custody sampling. And so I agree. In the F4 spec, we could drop totally peer sampling and reintroduce it if needed into GFork. In this case, we can move custody sampling from 4 to 8 and implement the simplification of the spec Dimitri proposed. And what I'm still confused a little bit is between custody sampling and subnet sampling. Maybe Francesco can explain a little bit more, or maybe someone can explain.
I mean, what I mean is just there's this custody thing, which is for full nodes is 4, and that's what you like advertise to other nodes and all that. And then
Yeah.
there's but it is done by subnets. The sampling still I guess the actual sampling is still subnet sampling. And then there is the extra sampling, which is the extra for that full nodes need to do. That is also done by subnet sampling, though there is the idea that in principle this could be replaced by peer sampling, but isn't at the moment. So I just wanted to differentiate between these two. And like I thought my understanding of what was being proposed was that this extra sampling, the let's call it subnet sampling or extra subnet sampling, I don't know, that should be just replaced by more custody. So making the custody requirement 8 for everyone, or the minimum 8 for everyone. So still doing subnet sampling, but just like making it all uniformly kind of custody instead of having these two types. Is that what's being proposed?
Yeah.
So
And
Dimitri mentioned that whether we can just make custody requirement equals to 8. And I think the issue with that is for compatibility, because if we make custody requirement 8, then we can't switch to like doing peer sampling for the 4 extra columns to get to 8 samples.
yeah. Yeah, that's right. The advantage to have a 4 plus 4 instead of 8 is that we can switch from custody sampling to peer sampling easily. And if we say custody requirement is 8, we cannot switch anymore. I mean, the spec would be simple with Dimitri's proposal, but currently I think it's a little bit more complicated, but it's not. I mean, it's doable. I mean, I implemented it in Prism. It's not so hard to implement the current spec.
You mean we may consider switching to 4 plus 4 in GFork, for example, and if we are already with 8, it will be an issue.
Yeah, if we say custody requirement is 8 for the full fork and not 4, so we cannot switch in full from custody sampling to peer sampling anymore. But the question is, do we really plan to do that for the F fork or not? To switch from custody sampling to peer sampling?
I think that's possible, right? If let's say if some clients are kind of ahead in implementation, and we might end up having time to implement peer sampling, and then we end up using less bandwidth.
Yeah.
and it's still spec compliant.
Yeah.
From my understanding, it wasn't proved that peer sampling gives better security on network. So we switched to something simple.
Well, it just uses less bandwidth. It doesn't give you better security, but it would be cheaper.
But I think there is no point to save the bandwidth if we don't bump the block count, right? Oh,
Oh, we will bump the block count.
yeah, but we require a hard fork anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is, once we set the custody requirement to 8, if we want to drop it, then it will require some extra work and also backward compatibility as well.
I mean, also in principle, even without changing the block count and like really needing to save bandwidth, you could just have, maybe some clients experiment with this and without needing like any change in other clients, and we could just get like some actual like mainnet understanding of how this works, even from like a few nodes or something like that. That seems like a decent, like if we do think that we eventually want to try to use peer sampling more, then that seems kind of a useful thing if it's not too complicated to allow for this.
I just want to ask Dimitri, so what's the current behavior for Teku?
We don't do peer sampling. We just check that custody for this block is filled.
And do you guys like subscribe to like 4 subnets or 8 subnets?
For subnets, yeah.
Oh, I see. So okay, so you're not doing enough samples per slot.
Yeah.
I see. Is there?
In Prism, we subscribe to 8 subnets for a full node, and for 8 subnets, of course, for with validator custody for 8 subnets for validators with a low amount of ETH. It's not that hard. If you need help, Dimitri, I think I can help.
Yeah, I think it's not complex to implement. Just I think full node and one validator node should have same requirements, and as a sub product, it will make spec simpler.
And it raised me a question actually, maybe for Francesco. So right now we have the difference between right now only the full nodes have this extra 4 columns. Only the full nodes without any validator. With peer sampling, how does it work? With peer sampling, a full node will sample 4 extra columns randomly. But as soon as you have one validator attached, do we still need to peer sample or not anymore? Or as soon as we have one validator attached, with validator custody, we subscribe to 8 subnets minimum, and then we do not need anymore to request random samples. I'm not sure about it.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, sure. With custody sampling for a full node, so without any validator attached, we have 4 custody columns, and then we subscribe to 4 extra columns for sampling. And as soon as we have at least one validator attached, the custody is 8. And so we don't sample more columns. We just custody 8, and that's all. And after, the custody amount increase with number of validator attached. So this is for custody sampling. My question is about peer sampling. For peer sampling, for a full node without any validator attached, we will subscribe and custody 4 columns, and then we'll sample 4 extra columns randomly with RPC. What about peer sampling with some validator attached? Do we still need to sample random columns via RPC, or it's not needed anymore? Because as soon as we have one validator attached, we already custody 8 columns.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I don't. We wouldn't really need it. Like we can just be fine with 8 columns. I mean, in principle, I guess we could change it. Like if I don't know, we saw that okay, this is much better. It works great, and we're fine with putting peer sampling in the critical path. Like for full nodes, it's a whole kind of different story, because even if I don't know, it takes longer, it's less reliable, it doesn't really matter so much. Like even if you can't all the time finish it in 4 seconds, it's not a big deal. For validators, if like okay, it met some kind of bar reliability where we're fine putting peer sampling in the critical path, yeah, we still probably need to think a bit about whether we're okay with switching some of the custody over to peer sampling. Maybe leave like a minimum amount of custody that's really just for subnets, and yeah, do like some of the custody as peer sampling, essentially, like not enforced. I think that would be fine, because anyway, I mean, the custody is still kind of honest behavior custody right now. So I think it would be okay to make that like not fully random, like still kind of determined by yeah, like anyway, yeah, what I'm trying to say is basically, yeah, we could, I think, switch over some of the custody to peer sampling if we needed to, but I guess the default would be that we don't need to do that, and we can just keep the minimum like of 8 for done through subnet sampling for validators. Yeah, sorry, that was maybe a bit too long, but just of it is, yeah, I think we wouldn't change anything for validators at first. We would only do so if we really wanted to kind of get some of the benefits of peer sampling, because it turns out that it was very reliable and worked better, saved bandwidth, etc.
Okay, so right now, basically, the peer sampling only applies for full node without validator attached. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah. I mean, as in like the possibility of immediately doing that, yeah, or the possibility that you know, one client might implement peer sampling and then switch over, yeah, it would only apply to full nodes at first.
Is it worth it to do it actually? I mean, because it adds a lot of complexity. Peer sampling adds a lot of complexity compared to custody samplings.
I mean,
And sorry?
do it as in like to do it as in to do peer sampling in as in this first, to like continue working on peer sampling in general, or do you mean like would it be worth it to do this like first switch where only full nodes?
Yeah. My question is it worth it to switch to peer samplings if it does only apply to full nodes without validator attached?
Right.
Because it's adds a lot of complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one reason we could want to do that is if we want to just get some mainnet data on how it works, and then like build up confidence that we can actually, we're fine with having validators use it. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, okay, so that's maybe the primary reason. The other reason would be just if we want to make full nodes a bit lighter to run. But yeah, that's maybe not super important, especially, I mean, given that if the comparison is with like nodes with one validator, which is not that much. So I don't know, if we don't care about that, then yeah, we could go back to how the spec was before and just set just custody to 8 for everyone. As I said in the chat, I don't really have much of a, like, this change was something that was asked for kind of a few months ago with this idea of forward compatibility. If, I don't know, people are not of the opinion that it's super important, at least I'm personally fine with not doing it. But I think it would be up to clients mostly to figure out if you know, if it actually is like a meaningful, like if it's worth simplifying or if it's worth keeping in this for compatibility. I don't really know.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, thanks. So it sounds like if we do peer sampling for full nodes with no validators, it could potentially save, I don't know how much, maybe up to half. I don't know if it's up to half of bandwidth, because with gossip we got the amplification. But if we don't have to subscribe to those subnets and do peer sampling, then we could probably save quite a bit. Depending on the blob count, if we have a high blob count, it's probably quite a lot. But I don't think we have much data on it. Do we want to make any spec change at this point?
Um, Yeah, I have a question, Dimitri, about your last comment, which is but increase sync time for all with full node in network. It's something which is
No,
not clear to me.
I mean, if you have one peer and it has only 4 columns in custody, and you need to sync 8 columns, so you need 2 peers for the same thing. There was enough one. I mean, full nodes share on only 4 columns.
Yeah, but, my question is, we discussed on Discord last week that even a full node should store in its database the 4 extra sampled column. Of course, we should store the 4 custody columns, but also the 4 extra ones. And so my question is, when the full node syncs, does the full node?
No. I meant when any other node need to sync. Validator node, for example. One validator node needs 2 full nodes to sync.
At minimum, yes. At minimum.
Yeah. That's my point. That's that you need to. All of them have all blocks, but for data columns you need 2 full nodes. And currently in the NOP, every node has all blobs for comparison.
But my question was, when we sync with a full node, do we need to sync only with the 4 custody columns or also with the 4 extra sampling columns, sampled columns? Because if a full node needs to, if we make the hypothesis that a full node should store even during the sync the 8 columns, so 4 custody plus 4 sampled columns, in this case,
as I understand, if we keep sampling, we should sample on sync too, yeah.
so we still need 8 in both cases.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, Francesco just mentioned again, it's we have the min custody 8 is for security reasons. Okay. Do we want to? Yeah, I'm not sure if we can make a decision now whether we want to make a spec change. Is there any further question that we want to discuss further, or are we okay to continue this discussion async? Katja?
Yeah, I have a question about the issue you discussed with Manu at the beginning. Is it somehow related to the dashboard, what we've seen on the dashboard for Lighthouse, or not? This gossip issue that you don't have like 128 columns for the gossip. Can it be related or not?
Yeah, so I'm not sure which metric you talk about. Yeah, before we jump onto that topic, I just want to make sure we're finished with this discussion. Or do we want to continue offline? Because I think there's still active discussion going on in the chat. Just want to make sure everyone is. Does anyone want to talk further on this topic before we continue?
Yeah, just a final question. Just so if I understand correctly from what's been said in the chat, right now they're essentially being treated exactly the same, except for the advertising. And so the only question then, it's not so much contributing to a network or like these kind of things, but purely just a question of like complexity of having these two different concepts in the spec and implementation, right? Like it's not really about like any kind of practical difference in behavior, but just extra complexity, correct?
Any more thoughts? We've got 2 thumbs up. Manu or Matt, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
No, sorry, yes, I agree. It adds some extra complexity. Yeah.
I mean, nothing from my side. Okay.
I think it's a silly differentiation, and if we're going to custody 8, why separate them to 2 different terms? Like, just save the data, serve the data. If really the only downside is you have to store more data in the database for, 2 ePerp, whatever the 4,000 epochs, whatever it is, the availability period. So be it. Makes it easier.
I mean, the original design of 4+4 versus 8, I repeat this, is because with 4+4, you are able to switch for custody sampling to peer sampling without any hard fork. It is really the main reason why we custody 4 and we sample 4 extra. If we decide not to switch to peer sampling, yes, in this case, we can ask the question, do we still need to keep this extra complexity?
Yeah, and I guess just to repeat something related to this that we mentioned before, this will only apply to full nodes. So I guess the key question is like, is there a tangible, meaningful benefit in being able to switch full nodes to peer sampling without a hard fork? To me, it seems like basically the only benefit is just being able to try peer sampling on mainnet without needing a hard fork for that. I don't know if people think that this is useful. I think, but I guess.
I mean,
can we agree if that's the only benefit? Or? Sorry, go ahead.
Like considering how the Holesky rollout went out today, like, do we really want to try features on? Do you know what I mean? In such broad context, I mean, it seems dangerous as a potential to keep it around for that kind of a potential.
I mean, this could even be like a single node. It doesn't have to be that, like a full, or I mean, I guess I said mainnet, but yeah, it could also be like, I guess on a test net. But yeah, I don't mean like you'll switch over 80% of the network. And again, it would also only be full nodes, so it's much less risky. But yeah, I guess maybe one thing we could try to agree on is like, is that the only benefit? Are there other reasons that we would want to do this? And then at least we can say, okay, if that's the only benefit, is it worth it? I don't know, does anyone else have other benefits in mind from doing this?
I mean, as just a general code perspective, it adds a total of 15, 20 lines of code to our implementation to have both sampled and custody configuration. So really, it's trivial from an implementation perspective. It just feels, from a spec perspective, it feels a bit confusing and convoluted. But honestly, as just devil's advocate, it's really 6 of one, a half a dozen the other. It's almost not even worth the discussion to me personally. This is kind of it's a nuance. So I guess I'll go with whatever consensus is amongst everybody else.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Matt. Does anyone have any strong feeling about this?
I am happy with the current spec, but if the consensus decides to simplify it and to go from 4+4 to 8, I won't oppose.
Yeah, it kind of feel like not many people have strong opinions on this. As far as I can tell. It's not Dimitri. It's not that we don't have consensus. It's just I think some of us don't have strong feeling about this, because since it's already implemented, and implementation wise, like what Manu says, is simple, but the spec is a bit convoluted. Yeah, I don't know if we can make a decision on this call.
Yeah, anyway, we are too far from finalizing full spec, so we have long time to go.
Okay,
I
so
wouldn't say that though, because I don't think we actually are planning to make any other changes to the spec. So, like in principle, the CL spec should stay as is if we don't see any reason to change it.
Okay.
yeah. I think the sooner we finalize the spec, the better.
I mean, just to point out, like, besides validator custody, which like the PR has existed since last summer or something, I don't think anything really has changed in the spec for a very long time. Besides this EL transaction pool thing now.
Silence is
Right.
golden. Like consensus.
All right. It seems like we can probably continue this offline. I mean, I think we've discussed most of the pros and cons of this issue, and yeah, we can continue this discussion offline. Yeah. So, Katya, sorry. Back to your metrics question. Would you mind starting again?
Yeah, my question was about the gossip verification metric, which I shared to you. So what I've seen on the dashboard that Teco and Prism have the same number of verified columns, like 128, and Lighthouse number was different. So could it be related to this issue you have between Lighthouse and Prism? You discussed it at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I haven't dig enough, because the issue that Manu was highlighting was the columns are not like not all the columns are being gossip from the Lighthouse node to the Prism peer. I think what you're seeing is like kind of the opposite. So you're seeing that Lighthouse is processing less columns, if I understand correctly.
What I've seen is it processing like less than 128 for Supernode.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the metric yet. But I can take a look. I can take a look at this this week.
Okay, thanks. And I can't see currently the clients for DevNet 5, so maybe I will drop the link. I will discuss it with Raphael in the channel.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thank you. Any other open questions? Agnish?
Can we decide on some action items so that we can get a deterministic supernode percentage? Like I know it's just been Holesky and yeah, there has been all of this news, but I think it would be very beneficial and also like it would help us estimate column syncing latency and all of that stuff if we get a good decent estimate on um what the validator custody thing. Yeah, like how many DMs have enough validators attached so that the total node balance is just about above 2048 ETH. So like I'm like we have some estimates in mind. Yes.
All right. Sorry. I was going to ask if you mean like an estimate of how many supernodes we have in the network, because I think, in my opinion, that shouldn't really matter with syncing. I don't think we should we should have an assumption on percentage of supernodes when we're syncing.
Yeah, I agree to that, but like at least it would help us estimate what kind of network we are seeing, and it would help us estimate at least the full node supernode distribution while we run devnets. In terms of that, yes. So yeah, if something can be done along those lines, like if we can get a decent number, maybe ask all the institutional stakers. I don't know like exactly how to go about this, but yeah, this is like open for discussion.
I tend to feel like that is going in the wrong direction. That excludes individual stakers, and to have any kind of reliance on supernodes, they're kind of, in my mind, a nice to have, not should be a need to have. And to make hard requirements or planning around them feels like we're
Exactly.
tailoring the discussion towards these. Like we personally, like we're planning to do the best we can with no supernodes and treat those as a nice to have. Like if you happen to have one as a peer, great. But to lean on them is, I feel, is antithetical to the ethos of what we're trying to do.
I totally agree. But then in that case, we should run some devnets without supernodes then. Or like at least
I agree with
like
that.
yes, or like we at least have some report out from each team that how is a column syncing like entire drag exactly running with just full nodes in a network.
Like I wouldn't even be against, like if we were to do a DevNet where just the boot node was a super node or something like that. So like at least there's one on the network just in case there's some kind of an issue. But everything is a full node and see how things go. Like we should push it to see what breaks because we shouldn't be relying on them to make sure the network stays whole.
Exactly. So I mean, from that angle, again, that's why I'm basically raising this question of getting the realistic percentage or the number. It's always good to know uh, what can be the estimate rather than, you know. So that's why.
So I don't really get like what exactly is the concern, because if if you imagine a DevNet, or I mean testnet, whatever it is, like net with all full nodes, there would be problems in that, like we need super nodes for reconstruction in the current design. That's just like part of the design, and it's not gonna go away magically. But in terms of syncing, it shouldn't be that different from what it is today. Like if all full nodes just get 4 columns or 8 columns of whatever it is, why would it be significantly different than it is today? I guess you're really worried about just I don't know, that peer count is not enough to have enough full nodes that cover all of the columns, or like what I mean when I say similar to today is in terms of bandwidth, like it would be roughly the same the same kind of amount of data that you're requesting from your peers, if you find peers that have the things that you need.
Yeah, but like I'm concerned about the sync speed. The sync speed would drop if we are just considering full nodes.
But like, why would it drop to lower than today? Like if you have
Because
the same...
you're spending more time in finding intersections of what your like, or like subsets of what your local is with other remote peers, like for every slot, because like the peers also get disconnected. So yeah, because in case of, let's say, blobs was not an optional thing. All of them had the same thing. So I mean, that's why, mainly because of that. Yes. Yeah, just say.
So
Yeah.
I guess your concern is that, so like, you're connecting to the right peers in order to make sure that you're going to have access to the columns that you need. And is that what I'm following?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Like, so
there
we're
should
doing that
be.
with our peer name. Like that's not necessarily a super node concern. That's more of a, like, we have a score weighting, kind of like gossip, but not exactly, in order to uh, basically cache the ENRs that we discover. And then when we need to connect to new peers, we basically pull the peer that has the desirable columns that overlap with ours, to make sure that we're going to be able to get the data that we need. Does that answer your question though? Like, I don't know. I don't understand what your concern is.
Yeah, that kind of does. Okay. I can take it offline if you want. We can take it offline.
And Vish, yeah, thanks for raising this. So I feel like what you really want to get out of this is how fast can we sync with PeerDAS, right? I kind of feel like we do need some sort of research in that area. I mean, I could put that down as an action item, and then we can probably continue from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be really good. That would be really good.
Okay, great.
Because
Thanks.
this is not
Yeah.
just about syncing. It's also about if validator custody is in place, like we all are doing it. And 1 second, I'm sorry. Yeah, if validator custody is in place and if we are all doing it, then with a bump in validator custody, our databases need to be re-backfilled, if I'm correct. Yeah. I read Lyon's HackMD recently where he said that there should be like an 18-day period where there should be no bad column scoring for peers, all of that. So yeah, I mean, just overall around this context, yes. I think there should be more research on column syncing speed, or syncing with PeerDAS. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Agnish. Yeah, I will probably reach out to you, and then we can probably add like an action item to our PeerDAS readiness checklist, if that's okay. Yeah, so unfortunately time's up. So I think for the remaining stuff that we want to discuss, we can continue offline. And for next week's call, it's going to be back to, I believe, 8 o'clock on Tuesday. So yeah, different time next week. And I'll send a reminder in the chat. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining the call. See you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Bye bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Happy Holesky, everybody! Woohoo!
Bye.